Only good Mayfield that I know is Mayfield Ice Cream, Mayfield Moving Band, and Curtis Mayfield. Anything other than that, I ain't with it.
And there's Baker Mayfield. Yeah, I know he's overrated as hell.
Baker Mayfield is overrated.
Absolutely.
Baker's last on this list, dog.
That's fair.
Everybody will know that. Come on.
Ain't nobody finna sit back and hope the heavens open up and say, I've been in a situation I said, thank you, God. Hey, there ain't nobody saying that about Baker Mayfield.
He's not everybody's cup of Gatorade. He's an acquired taste. He is not your taste. He's not a lot of people's taste. But he can flat out play in this league, especially if he winds up with somebody who is his flavor of Gatorade.
One of the most important things for any NFL quarterback is confidence and continuity, and we have seen the results of that recipe when done right. However, when done incorrectly, it can ruin the career of that QB and leave them in a place where many, if not most, never get a chance to prove themselves again, to eventually finding themselves out of the NFL. This is the situation that Baker Mayfield almost found himself in. He had to dig himself out of not just one horrible situation, but two, until he eventually found himself a NFL home. But how did he find himself here? And why did it take a high school phenom, Heisman winning QB 4 NFL teams later for him to eventually find a match made in heaven? Well, let's go back in time and take another look. April 14, 1995, born and raised in Austin, Texas, Baker Mayfield would grow up and quickly make a name for himself on the field, leading his high school Lake Travis to a 25-2 record in 2 seasons, along with a 4A championship in 2011. He finished his high school football journey with 6,255 passing yards, 67 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. And if you know anything about the state of Texas in football, they go hand in hand. Some of the greatest NFL players of all time are from Texas. Patrick Mahomes, Earl Campbell, Von Miller, Myles Garrett, and many others are from Texas, a place where they don't play about football. So at this time, Baker Mayfield wanted to play for a big-time school, but he was only a 3-star recruit, so he decided to walk on at Texas Tech. Now, Baker Mayfield's arrival at Texas Tech is an interesting one because as a walk-on, he was not supposed to start at the beginning of the season, but due to a back injury to a former Lake Travis quarterback in Michael Brewer, Baker became the first walk-on true freshman to start an FBS season opener at the quarterback position. And in his college debut, not only would he play well, he would play well beyond everyone's expectations.
The biggest question for Cliff Kingsbury as head coach at Texas Tech: who is going to be his quarterback in game 1? The answer is the true freshman walk-on Baker Mayfield.
His first game was a matchup against SMU where he threw for 413 yards with 4 touchdowns. Baker would finish the season earning Big 12 Freshman Offensive Player of the Year. In 8 games, he had 2,315 passing yards, 12 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. Despite having success at Texas Tech, he would decide to leave the program and head to Oklahoma, a move that was made due to the miscommunication between him and the coaching staff.
Cliff and I had a great relationship. We were open, we talked a lot, we went back and forth on opinions on what plays that I liked, and all of that kind of played into a factor, and that's when I realized that was the right spot for me, but it felt like I was going to be at home a little bit. I went from being the guy for Coach Kingsbury, and then when I got hurt, it just changed a little bit, and not a little bit, a lot. All of a sudden, it was as if I hadn't played for him, hadn't done anything for him. It was just different after I got hurt.
On top of that, Baker Mayfield has said that he was not given a scholarship for the upcoming spring, so he decided to leave. Head coach at the time, Cliff Kingsbury, would deny these allegations. Either way, back then, if you transferred within the conference, you had to sit out a year, so that's what Baker Mayfield did. He tried to appeal that decision, but it was unsuccessful. After a open quarterback competition, Baker would win the starting job and put on an old-fashioned show the entire season. The highlights of the season for Baker would be his insane performance against Tulsa: 487 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 85 yards on the ground. They would make it to the Orange Bowl but lose to Clemson 37-17. He finished this 2015 season with 3,700 passing yards, 36 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. The following year, we will see a bump in his numbers, going for 3,965 passing yards, 40 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. And now we get to a fantastic year. It's 2017, and remember that year Baker lost due to transferring to Oklahoma? That rule would later be amended and nicknamed the Baker Mayfield rule, which allowed him to play in 2017. And what a year it would be. This would go on to be one of the most exciting and drama-filled seasons I've ever seen from a quarterback. The year started out with an easy win over UTEP, then Baker Mayfield and the Oklahoma Sooners would soon face off against Ohio State, and it got real ugly quick. The man put the flag in the middle of the field. That's just disrespectful. A game where he finished with 386 yards and 3 touchdowns to beat the then number 2 team in the nation, Ohio State. Oklahoma was ranked number 5 at that time. He would apologize for his actions during that game, but at that time, Baker Mayfield was going to be Baker Mayfield, because it would not take long for something else to come up. In their game against Kansas, he would have some choice words for the Kansas fans.
He's just looking at the Kansas sideline. It's inappropriate. That's inappropriate, uncalled for, and that right there, NFL GMs are going to see that, and they're going to mark it down, saying, that's not what we want in the National Football League.
In a game that he had 257 passing yards with 3 touchdowns. Now, he was talking the talk and walking the walk all season long, but the incident in particular got his captain spot revoked, along with his starting role for the next game. However, he would still play and drop a cool 281 passing yards with 3 touchdowns. Easy work for Baker Mayfield. They would wrap up their season with their 3rd straight Big 12 championship and a 41-17 beatdown against TCU. Baker Mayfield finished the regular season with 4,340 yards, 41 touchdowns with just 5 interceptions. A great season that won him the Heisman Trophy that year. And despite all the antics, all the trash talk that some hated but others loved, he was without a doubt the best player in the country. But what would follow this is a game that would be remembered for years to come, and is arguably one of the greatest Rose Bowl games of all time.
Temperatures in the mid-70s for this 104th Rose Bowl game. A play action, flip to the end zone, touchdown! Dumps it down, caught, touchdown. Michelle, what an answer from Georgia! Throws it to the quarterback, and Mayfield catches a touchdown pass. Sonny Michel will send the Dogs home to the championship game.
Baker finished with 287 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick, but unfortunately for Baker Mayfield, Oklahoma would lose to Georgia. And that's not to diminish his time at Oklahoma. Each year he was there, he went 11-2. He would finish his college career with 14,607 passing yards, 131 passing touchdowns, with only 31 interceptions in his 4 years in college. And with all of his accolades, all of the college heroics, Baker Mayfield would be drafted to the Cleveland Browns with the number 1 pick. There were 5 QBs selected in that first year: Baker Mayfield himself, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, and Lamar Jackson. Now, Cleveland was coming off of one of the worst seasons of all time, where they won nothing. 0-16 was their record that last year. So Baker was coming into a situation where it was less than ideal. Despite that though, Baker would have a pretty good rookie season. Unlike some number 1 overall picks, Baker would not immediately start. We would not see his first career start until week 3 of the NFL season, after the starter at that time, Tyrod Taylor, would suffer an injury against the New York Jets. Down 14 points, he would rally to win that game, 21-17, which was his first win of that season, and the win that ended the streak of 19 straight losses. A game that many at that time thought would be the beginning of a new era for the Cleveland Browns, and it did look like that for a while. Baker finished his rookie campaign with 3,725 passing yards, 27 touchdowns, and it looked like the Cleveland Browns were in good hands with their number 1 overall pick. But how long would the honeymoon phase last? The Cleveland Browns were determined to add some offensive firepower for a group that already had Jarvis Landry and Nick Chubb. This would be the year they traded for Odell. In return, the Giants received 1st and 3rd round picks in 2019, along with the safety Jabril Peppers. Baker Mayfield would have a typical sophomore season, some struggles here, some struggles there, just like in his first game of the season, where he threw 3 fourth-quarter interceptions in a 43-13 loss to the Titans. But he will also have some flashes of greatness in that year as well. The very next week, he would throw for 325 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception against the Jets. Odell would go for 161 yards and a touchdown, so many wondered, would we see the week 1 version of Cleveland or the week 2 version of Cleveland? Well, The answer is both. We would see some highs and lows from this team all season. Baker threw for just 100 yards against a pretty good 49ers team in a 31-3 Week 5 loss. They went on a 4-game losing streak from Week 5 to Week 9 with a bye week in between that. Baker also ended that season with a 33-23 loss where he had 279 passing yards and 3 touchdowns, but added 3 interceptions that facilitated that loss. However, in a Week 4 win against the Ravens, he put up great numbers. 342 passing yards with a touchdown and 1 interception. He torched a Miami team for 327 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and just 1 interception in a Week 12 41-24 win. And with that roller coaster of a season finally coming to an end, Cleveland would finish the season 6-10. Baker Mayfield would finish with 3,827 passing yards, 22 touchdowns, but he also added 21 interceptions. Some highs, some lows, but Cleveland still had hope. The beginning of the year wouldn't start exactly how the Cleveland Browns had hoped, with a blowout loss to the Ravens 38-9. A few weeks later, he would struggle against the Steelers, going 10 of 18, 119 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. He got replaced by Case Keenum in the third quarter due to an aggravating minor rib injury. However, the following week, he would throw for a career-high 5 touchdowns in a game with 297 passing yards in a 34-37 win over the Cincinnati Bengals. Another roller coaster of a season, but this time there would be more highs than lows. Baker would go 5 games in a row with at least 250 passing yards starting in Week 12, 258 against the Jags, 334 against Tennessee, 343 against the Ravens, 297 against the Giants, and 285 against the Jets. The Browns finished 11-5 in the regular season and would go on to get their first playoff win against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Baker Mayfield would go for 263 yards, 3 touchdowns in a 48-37 win, in what would be their first playoff win since 1994. And their first road playoff win since 1969. They would lose to the Kansas City Chiefs 22-17 in the divisional round. Baker would throw for 210 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. And despite the ups and downs, it was an overall good season for Baker Mayfield. A playoff win, the career highs, pretty good if you ask me. Baker Mayfield finished 2020 with 4,030 passing yards, 30 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. His best season by far up until this point. In 2021, the Browns will exercise Baker Mayfield's 5th-year option. This would be the same year Baker tore his labrum in his non-throwing shoulder, an injury that would affect his play. He also missed his first game as a Brown in Week 7 and would not undergo surgery for this until the season was over. He finished with 3,010 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions in 14 games. Many saw this as a regression, even though Baker was injured throughout the season, which, looking back on it now, it doesn't seem like it was worth the risk. It worked out in the end, but this season alone almost ended his NFL career due to how people perceived him after all of it. This would be Baker's last year playing for the Browns, as Cleveland would potentially make one of the worst trades of all time. That saga is still yet to be determined, and it may eventually turn around, but they traded for Deshaun Watson and gave him a $230 million contract, which was fully guaranteed. But what went wrong for Baker? Well, during his time in Cleveland, many considered him childish and immature. The lack of coaching cohesion also attributed it to his lack of development during his time, along with him being injured in his last season there. During his Cleveland days, he had to go through 4 head coaches: Hugh Jackson his rookie year to a dose of Greg Williams, Freddie Kitchens in 2019, and Kevin Stefanski in 2020, who remains the head coach right now. 2020 will also be the year they replaced the GM who drafted Baker Mayfield in the first place. That is John Dorsey for Andrew Berry. So with all of that being said, we continue to see how inconsistency with organizations continue to hurt young quarterbacks, and this usually leads to that organization moving on from that young quarterback. As we see in that trade for Deshaun Watson, the Cleveland Browns were on a different timeline, and that timeline did not include Baker Mayfield. So with that move, it prompted the Browns to trade Baker to the Panthers, which would be be a temporary stop. He would win the starting job over Sam Darnold in what was a short-lived Matt Rule era, a guy who is a fantastic college coach, but he went 1-4 to start the season, then he was let go. He was there 3 years and had a overall record of 11-27, but once again, Mayfield would find himself in the middle of another inconsistent situation. Steve Wilks would take over the helm as the interim head coach. In 7 games, Baker Mayfield had 1,313 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. He went 1-5 as a starter and was on target for career lows in every category before he was eventually released on December 5th, 2022. And if it wasn't for an injury to Matthew Stafford, he may have remained a free agent, but the next day, he would find himself claimed on waivers by the LA Rams. And after clearing waivers, he would play in his first game for them on Thursday of that same week in a matchup against the Raiders, a situation where he had to learn the playbook in less than a week, and I'm sure it wasn't the whole playbook, but either way, to be dropped into a new system in that short amount of a time is impressive, and to do what he did is even more impressive.
Mayfield from his own end zone caught, more light, sideline, and it is caught by Skoranek. 2nd and 10, Mayfield to the end zone to Jefferson. Is that possible? Touchdown!
In his first game, he would have a 97-yard game-winning drive after less than a week with the team. He played a total of 5 games and won 2 of those. This earned him the opportunity to come back next year with a healthy Matthew Stafford and continue to be the Rams' backup. But the season would end and Baker Mayfield would bet on himself and sign with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where he would finally get his second chance at starting QB life. He found himself in a QB battle with Kyle Trask, who he beat out for the job, a situation that was initially a potential bridge option due to the retirement of Tom Brady. That was until Baker Mayfield would have one of his best years as a pro and eventually lead them to a playoff victory against the Eagles 32-9. They would unfortunately lose to the Detroit Lions 31-23 the following week, but nonetheless, this is a season that no one saw coming. No one actually believed that Baker Mayfield could take this team to the playoffs and not only get there, but actually get a win. I know it was against a Eagles team that really did not look good down the stretch, but a win is a win, and in the playoffs, you gotta take them how you get them. The Bucs finished that season 10-9, and this was Baker Mayfield's 7th year in the NFL. Finally starting for a competent organization, the results were evident, and this production looked to have followed him over into the following season. And with all of that being said, the book is not yet complete for Baker Mayfield. But with a cast of Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, a good head coach in Todd Bowles, the story is really trending in the correct direction, but no one knows how it would end. He has things to prove and the job is not yet finished. This is simply his first step in proving the doubters wrong.